Everyone for being here tonight. This is our third to last talk in our speaker series, and I just want to invite everyone to the upcoming talk. Next week, Weston Sprott, who's the Dean of the Juilliard Pre-College Division, will be coming for a conversation about equity and inclusion and the way he deals with it in an institution like Juilliard. And tonight, I'm very happy to welcome Arianna Falk from Worcester Neighborhood Strings, and I will hand it over to her right now.
Thanks so much, Professor Chang, for hosting this really wonderful set of speakers on such an important and interesting topic that's that's relevant and dear to my heart. So I'll be really happy to speak tonight a little bit about my journey to work with the Worcester Chamber Music Society and to create Neighborhood Strings, this our social justice oriented music program for kids in Worcester, Massachusetts. Worcester is actually the second biggest city in New England, a fact not known by many, just right down the road, with incredible resources, one of the best concert halls in New England, or really in the country, and a really rich and diverse community with a lot to offer. I'm going to speak a little bit from the perspective of working specifically within the context of chamber music and a chamber music society. I think most of us are sort of from the music world here, know of chamber music as being this very particular kind of music making that's about small groups working together, string quartets or quintets, and it's in a way, I was thinking about it as I was thinking through what I would talk about tonight. Chamber music is really the perfect model for like a ideal civil society. Chamber music is so collaborative and democratic, and sometimes in reality, it's full of just as much conflict as anything in the world. But in its ideal form, it's really a wonderful model for how kids and adults and societies can work together. And I think part of that is what's made it such a beautiful fit to start a kids program from within the context of a chamber music society. So I'm going to start with just a little bit about my own journey. I started off very much as a player. I'm a cellist, and I was just really interested in being a cellist, in playing music, in studying the instrument. I studied a lot of other things too. I mean, I was interested in English literature and philosophy and history and how that fit together with music. But ultimately, for me, it was about the instrument and about the music making. I had this really great teacher, a Brazilian teacher, Aldo Pariso, one of my great mentors, who just died last year. He was almost 100 years old and like this amazing life force. And through him, I met this wonderful community of musicians, of players, all over the world, all over the country, cellists and musicians of all stripes. And from that place, I got to spend some time in Europe on a Fulbright scholarship and met all these musicians over there and sort of became party to this network of musicians and music making, this community that forms around the act of music making all around the world. From there, I landed back in the Boston area. I was continuing studies. I was working on a doctoral degree and sort of had my first, as a player, taste of the musical world, or the professional world, I should say, in New England. It's something of a wake-up call. I think when one realizes, like, for all these sort of amazing studies and travels and concerts and concertos and people that one meets, the world can sometimes shrink when you think like, wow, I did all this in order to sort of like try to impress some conductor and drive 3 hours and sit in the back of this orchestra where a lot of people don't really seem to want to be there. And there's a lot that's one can be cynical about, or at the very least, I mean, there's wonderful musicianship out there, but one can ask the question, is this really what it's all about? Or is this really what the height of music making can be? So one starts to ask those kinds of questions. The one experience I did have early on in Boston, this is before I got involved with music and social justice, but I was thinking back on this actually because I think it did make an impact on me. I had actually been working as an SAT tutor, just like to make a buck. I was in graduate school. It pays very well. And the company I was working for paid to have me do a bunch of classes at sort of quote unquote inner city schools in Boston, schools that had all these challenges in Boston. Um, and it was quite an eye-opening experience just to see that, like, wow, if you go to these, supposedly very gritty places, and they did have like, incredible space issues and behavior issues and kids with challenges, but just be passionate, commit to the place, show up every week, do offer what you have to give. And it like people really liked studying for the SATs and their scores improved. And it was like very sort of, like positive and warm experience as much as it can be around something as awful as a standardized test. But it was in a way a very eye-opening experience to me just to see, wow, like working in some of these rougher school environments can still yield this like incredible community. But what really from there made a sort of big sea change in my direction as a musician was getting to spend some time at this wonderful organization, Community Music Works, in Providence. And I know Sebastian Ruth, the founder of Community Music Works, I believe has spoken here on this series. So many may be, familiar with him, with his great work as an entrepreneur and as a founder of that organization. And what was really so striking there, and that I think I hope I've tried to bring to Worcester, is the true integration of education and performance as sort of a full musicianship. Like he was always asking the question, like, what can an artist really do to contribute to society? And I think in some form, many of us ask those questions in the music world and in wherever our careers, may be. But to me, he had created a kind of answer to that question through the integration of performance and education. It's a false divide to think like, well, either you can be like this really great player who's focused on music making, or you can be a pedagogue and learn to teach and work with kids. And it's not the only place that integrates those two, but it's an amazing example of it. It's like, no, as a full musician, those things support and enrich each other. And that was really striking to me. The other thing I really took away from that experience that I think that I've tried to carry forward into our project in Worcester is to work against I guess you could call it the ATM, he calls it the ATM model, ATM machine model of teaching. In other words, I'm the ATM machine. I'm the person who has all this really great culture that you want. And so you come with your ATM card and you can withdraw your culture because that's what you need. And so I'm the giver, you're the taker. And it can sometimes, in its worst iterations, it can feel that way. But in Community Music Works, and it was always about being the two-way street. Like I give something to you and you give something back to me. That there's always a mutuality going on. Of course, there's a reality like, where some of us are the teachers and some are the students and some of us are the ones who know how to read music and other are people who may want to learn. But to have sort of the basis of the interaction be a kind of mutuality in the community, I think is really, really important. And that was an amazing thing to take away. So when I finished my fellowship there, the stars kind of aligned to start a project in Worcester in alignment with the Worcester Chamber Music Society. I had known the group as a guest artist occasionally, and along with a couple really important colleagues, my executive director, Tracy Krause, who's done amazing work with the group in the city. I think it was about in its maybe 5th year at that point. And Peter Sulsky, who was a Worcester native and has always been really committed to the cultural life of the city. And so we started this project, Neighborhood Strings. And I think when one starts a project, it's always, about looking for what are the good things, what are the resources, in addition to like what are the challenges. And Worcester, Massachusetts does have these amazing resources. I mean, I mentioned Mechanics Hall is one of the really the greatest concert halls in the country. I mean, Yo-Yo Ma records there. You know, maybe you've heard of him, and it's really a great place to play. There's like 9 colleges, I think, in Worcester, so it's kind of overflowing with students. And it has a really large immigrant population. I think about 20% of the city is foreign born from 85 countries. I was just reading the large population from Ghana, large population from Dominican Republic, large population from Vietnam, from Albania. Believe it or not, it's one of these like funny immigrant populations with the these close communities that will form abroad. A large immigrant population, which creates this amazing energy for the city. It also leads to, I think about 1/3 of the kids in Worcester are English language learners, are characterized. So there's just a lot of challenges in schools. There's a lot of poverty and kids who need to learn English, and families that are still getting off the ground as immigrants. So the Chamber Music Society was already doing some really substantive educational work in Worcester, but it was of a different kind. It was something like, let's do this family concert in Mechanics Hall, and 1,000 kids are going to show up and see Peter and the Wolf. And that's like this really, played by these top musicians, because, the people in the Chamber Music Society are like some of the best musicians in New England. I mean, really, really fine players. So that is a cool thing to do. Or go into a school, have some kids play a master class. This would happen a few times a year. So there was education work going on, but that is a different thing from what's the follow-up from that? You have this striking experience where you say, oh, I heard this violinist play in Peter and the Wolf, and like I loved it, and like I'm curious about that. It's a different thing from, we are going to see you every week. We're going to invite you into our lives. We're going to be part of your community, because it really is about the neighborhood in the end, hence our name. We're going to be part of your community. We're going to be musicians who are residents in your community who are working there, and we're going to form that together. And so that's the two-way street, and that was an important part of what we thought about really being, as musicians, for us, connected to the community, not just to music lovers, but to people from all walks of life. To me, creating the program became about really creating a community around music, and that's what it's about. When we think about transforming lives, or transforming kids, or transforming community, all that stuff, can be a little fraught depending how far you go with those kinds of ideas. But if you just make it about creating a community around music, that's a safe space. It's safe for kids, physically and emotionally, where their voices can be heard and their ideas can be respected, where they can have relationships with caring adults, which can make, we all know, just having even like one caring adult like outside of your immediate family who's keeping track of you. I mean, that has been shown, and we can all feel it, to make like a huge difference in kids' lives. And out of that comes all those great qualities, like, getting to explore your leadership, and learning that kind of sense of discipline, and learning to be open to learning and to working hard. I mean, I think all that comes out of creating the community around music. So we started this project, we just had a small grant at first. It was like 10 kids. It was and still is a partnership with the public school system. So our first program site is in an elementary school, and it was always about relationships, just creating those kind of close relationships, the strings between the kids and the musicians. In our program, the kids take private lessons, and eventually I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but we do some really substantial ensemble playing as well. But the private lessons, in a way, have always been the heart of the program. It's violin, viola, and cello. And everyone who teaches in the program is like a fine artist. That's just part of our core value system, that kids really can feel the artistry. They respond to it, and that's where the really sort of quality educational experience comes from. We knew the program had to be essentially free, and it had to be close or, in the school. In fact, most of our programming still has always taken place in the schools where we teach. That's just about access. We know if there are plenty of music schools in Worcester that offer like great scholarships, and it's not always about just money, but it's simply about accessibility. And so doing all those things to make what we do part of the community and make ourselves part of the community felt like that was part of it, not just it's free. But of course, being free creates a huge challenge too. I mean, we continue to, with amazing leadership from my executive director, Tracy, we raise every dollar for the program every year from grants and private donations. And that's a huge project to take it on. But we made the decision that keeping it, I think the kids now pay like a $50 fee for the year, but it's essentially a free program. That was really important to us to continue to keep it that way. When kids start in the program, we do a kind of paper instrument routine. I'm going to show some pictures a little bit later, but you'll see some cool pictures of kids playing with their paper instruments. But if you've never seen this happen, it's a way of working together with kids and mentors and sometimes parents, and they'll make an art project of an instrument. We do violins because it's just like too big to do a cello, but so they all do violin, and they put a lot of care into it, and they sort of learn how it works to hold the instrument, to take care of the instrument, and to be in an ensemble environment through the paper instrument. And then we have a really great ceremony, which I'll show some pictures of in a little bit, where the kids they each come up and they say like a little pledge about taking care of the instrument. And it's just a fun event, and then they get to go home with their instruments, and from there on they are full participants in the program, and they take lessons, and they most kids come a couple times a week, some as many as 3 or 4 times a week, for different kinds of musical activities. Another component that we started early on and that's still going now, and by the way, I should have mentioned we are now in the 10th year of Neighborhood Strings, so we're approaching our 10th anniversary. We started a teen leadership group called the NS Club, Neighborhood Strings Club. And this is the component of the program that more explicitly explores social justice issues. We think there's a sort of bigger social justice project to doing this kind of work at all, to putting musicians in the community and creating these relationships. But in this teen group, they more explicitly will say, watch documentaries, have some discussions about civics, what's going on in the world. They do some special run-out concerts, and we do talk about access, and we talk about racism, and we talk about audiences and changing audiences. I think all that is there implicitly all the time, but it's also great to have a space where we do that explicitly. So at this point, I wanted to, I'm going to show a short video clip, just so you can hear some of the voices of the kids and kind of put some sight and sound to some of what I've been talking about. So this is a little movie just showing some voices of the kids that was put together for a gala event we had a couple of years ago. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, and just speak up if you find that you are not seeing or hearing this correctly, please. There's no sound yet.
At Know Your School night, my mom came to this table and she signed me up without me knowing. So she just signed me up and I didn't even know about it, and then she told me that I want to be going to this program.
We started our first year with just 10 kids, 10 instruments. We got a grant to buy instruments, and we had this dream of coming into the school and coming into this community and making a real deep impact and touching kids in this really deep way.
They taught us about the violin, and then we didn't just start right away. We got to know our violin, we named our violin, and then we played our violin.
At the beginning, it was pretty nerve-wracking because we had to pick our instruments, and I didn't know what I wanted to play, so I decided cello was the most interesting instrument for me. Neighborhood Strings was more of like a commitment for me. It was more like I can help little kids, I can show what I want to play the cello and just influence other people. It was pretty interesting experience.
I get very happy when I'm in this program. I exercise my arm a lot by going, hey, hey.
One of the really special things about this year is that we're seeing kids who we started in 4th and 5th grade graduate from high school and go to college. And that's amazing to see them grow up into adults. We've seen it all happen in front of us through music, and that's been quite a journey with them.
You get to play, you get to go to concerts all around the world. Mechanics Hall has over 1,000 people. You feel nervous, but then you're like, oh, I've done this before. And then you sort of grow out of it.
To me, it's great to see the journey from a student who comes in a little unsure the first day to someone who's playing all around the state as a member of that teen leadership group.
It helped me with a lot with the nervousness of performing in front of people. It gave me a sense of what music is and how me as a teenager, I can show other people that I'm doing music not only for me, but for other people who it can help and just give them a sense of happiness.
It makes me feel more confident because now I have an instrument in my hands, so I know that I am supposed to be there.
So our hope and our dream was to start a program that's just really making a sustained impact on kids' lives, that we get to see them every day, we get to know their families, we get to really change the way they're thinking about who they are as people and what their options are as they get older. One thing that I think would be a great dream for this program is that every student who comes through has an opportunity to go to college if they stick with the program. So it's a really different kind of vision than just let's hear some nice music. It's like let's really get to know you, change you, and hopefully even change the nature of the place we live through touching all these kids and families in a hopefully meaningful way.
I want it to be every day, so I could go oh, I can't come home, I have to go to strings, and it's an excuse to get out of chores.
I could say I feel like I would never lose that feeling of shyness, never feel so isolated. I wouldn't have found such confidence or such a loving group of people that would help me, play an instrument and help other people. I don't think I would. I feel like I'd be just boring.
You have 30 minutes of extra time. You could do anything. You could use your phone, you could play Pokemon, you could even do your hair. And you could learn to do more than just what you do at home, or what you do at the playground, or what you do in your pool if you have one. It just grows your maturity.
You could do your hair. I always love that part. What a great line. That guy's still taking lessons. Joshua. So yeah, those were some tastes of some of the voices in the program. I want to go on to say a little bit about how things developed after the initial couple of years. So after our initial partnership with a public school in Worcester, we expanded to open a second site in a charter school, which is still part of the public school system. But we were asked to open a second site in a charter school, and we did so. And it actually, it expanded our demographic in kind of a cool way because it happens to be a charter school that is extremely popular with the African population of Worcester. So 3/4 of the kids who are in the program with us there are immigrant families from Ghana, which is some pretty amazing energy, and it's been a great sort of component of the community to connect with. And then in about 3 years ago, my wonderful violinist colleague, Debbie Greenbaum, came to us. She's already been doing great work in Worcester for many years, and wanted to start a third arm, so to speak, of the program that specifically served the refugee and immigrant refugee population of Worcester. And Worcester has a large refugee population. I think it's the largest refugee population of any what they say gateway city in Massachusetts. And there's a program in a specific public school that was called the New Citizens Program that was essentially for kids who had been out of formal schooling. So they're often kids who were definitely English language learners. Families often didn't have transportation, were still like very much still, new to the country. And so Debbie, heroically started a program working with these kids, and it has been quite challenging, and I think also really rewarding. But that's the New Citizens Program at the Clark Street School in Worcester, which is also a public school, has really sort of completed the picture for us in a wonderful way. I wanted to say a word about some of the mentoring that we support and that we do in the program. You probably saw perhaps in some of those clips and videos that there are some sort of in-between age people, I should say, who are not kids and who are not the teaching artists. So early on when we started the program, because my colleague Peter and I both teach at Clark University, and this our program site is just a couple of blocks, right next to the campus of Clark University. We had some students from the orchestra there who wanted to help, who wanted to get involved. They wanted to get off campus. They wanted to give back in some way. So from really early on, we had some college kids who were finding their place contributing as mentors to the program. And that really developed over time, so that we have often supported as many as like 10 or 15, oftentimes college kids who are helpers in the program. Many of them are musicians, but not all of them. There are a lot of ways people contribute besides just playing along. But playing is one of the big ways, because that's what we do at the end of the day. We also, we have a summer chamber music camp that we run in Worcester. It's typically on the campus of Clark, ChamberFest, which is a great camp, a great chamber music camp. And we found that we had high school students from the camp, teenagers who are younger, who wanted to help out in neighborhood strings. And I started a formalized program for them called Musician as Citizen, where we would just talk about some of these ideas, some of the kinds of ideas that I'm sure you all have been learning about in the in this series about music and social justice and getting around different kinds of programs around the world. And so they would enroll in that program. They would apply and they would enroll, and they would make a weekly commitment to help out as mentors. And we even have some adult amateurs who we met through this and that, like adult, either through camp or through an adult orchestra, who also are often players who want to come and contribute and give back. And so, my hope for the mentorship program, and it does allow us to serve the kids more, because it creates energy around the ensembles and extra pairs of hands and legs to help with all this setup and all the, putting chairs away and all this kind of thing, and musical energy. And I think, there are these nice layers of mentoring where a lot of them are really getting something out of it from the professional musicians as well. I mean, they're getting chances to play, learning how to teach a little bit, and they're certainly giving back to us and giving a lot to oftentimes a child may respond much more to a college student. A child may see their teacher as their teacher, but they may open up much more to someone who's 17 or 19. And we've seen that happen like zillions of times. And it seems to happen without needing to make it happen. It seems to happen naturally. So that, that mentorship component has been really great. And in fact, we even 2 semesters had a class at Clark that had almost the same name as this class. I think it was like very similar, like music and community and social action or something like that. And the kids in that class came in as mentors during that college semester and did this similar kind of work. And that was also really great. I mean, it was like almost too much because it was a lot of college kids, but it was memorable and they contributed a lot. So I think that's something unique that we've developed it with Neighborhood Strings. I mean, I think we have a really robust sort of mentorship component to everything we do that's added a lot. Going forward from these program sites, I think in recent years we've really beefed up the kind of ensemble component of what we do. I'm gonna in a minute show a few more slides of different kinds of performances, but we part of what we started to realize is that, well, for one thing, it's hard to get kids to practice at home if that's not like their family culture necessarily. But if they're with us and they're playing, then like they're playing and they're practicing. So having them just, rather than saying, have your lesson and go home and practice, say, well, have your lesson and then tomorrow come back and play in this ensemble and you're going to get more hours playing, that works really well. And some really nice sort of magic can happen in ensembles. I mean, you sort of will see kids kind of give themselves over to the larger whole and, work really hard, often play above their level. Maybe if you heard them play their part by themselves, they can barely play it, but in the group, the sound is created, everything sort of comes together. And so people have these great ensemble experiences. Although I would say that I personally always try to sort of do it from like I mentioned at the beginning, I guess, the chamber music perspective. In a way, there are these, programs based around sort of the orchestra as the model of civil society. I mean, LSU STAMA sort of being an example of that, but there are other ones. And they can be like really magical, but when, in some way an orchestra is, like a totalitarian dictatorship. It's not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't have to work that way, but at its worst, it certainly does. And so I think when we do ensemble to come at it as chamber musicians, because we are a chamber music society, from this sort of more mutual and collaborative affect and trying to sort of bring out what's good about chamber music as ourselves as models, modeling the behavior that we think is the way to be as artists and as human beings for the kids. I think that's something that we're able to create being a chamber music society, the collaboration. So we are able to get kids out a lot for performances, lots of different kinds of places. I should say all this in the context of pre-pandemic times more so, but it's kind of nice to just not be talking about the pandemic for a minute. So I'm sort of mostly talking about the beginning through, this time last year. We have taken kids to play at like a family health center in the neighborhood. They play at the Stand Against Racism event at the YWCA. They've played on the radio station, WCUW. They almost always play as the opening act of the big family show previously mentioned that our group does in either Mechanics Hall or more recently the Hanover Theater. So it's quite a sight to see like all the kids. We're up to about 85, seeing all those kids up on stage. And for some of them, they haven't been playing very long. They might just be playing like open string accompaniments to something, but it can really be one of those like, wow, I'm going to remember that moment, playing on the stage in Mechanics Hall with 1,000 people in the audience. Whenever we ask kids what they remember at the end of the year, that's certainly part of it. But the smaller shows, playing at a park or playing at the library, those things also are really meaningful. And it's part of our mission to be getting kids out into the community, both for their sakes and also like, because it's really great to see, kids of all stripes walking down the street with violins and cellos and being out there in the community. I mean, I think that changes the neighborhood, that changes where we live, in addition to like being really striking and memorable for those kids themselves. So I'm going to show just a few slides of just, a few different kinds of events. If I can make the screen share thing work again. One second, somehow I lost it. Here we go. Let's see. Can you see, everybody see that okay? Yes. So yeah, these are, I just always like this picture. This is like from our first year, but it's-
You're not seeing anything right now.
You're not seeing anything. Okay, thanks. Let me try that again. How about now?
No.
Strange. How about now? No? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why that worked, but okay. So you see a boy with a cereal box? Okay. Yeah, so that is from, the first year of the program. It was the early version of the paper instruments. We do it a little bit of a different way now, but I just thought that was a cute picture. These are some of these little paper instruments that we make with kids. These amazing, they do these like nice cutouts and they decorate them. And this is our instrument ceremony. Getting your instrument for the first time, taking a pledge. After these guys have just gotten their instruments. Some of these are backstage shots. This is a great concert that we do right in downtown Worcester. We have a concert series called Music on Main that will feature local musicians, guest artists. And so it's kind of packed, as you can see. It's fun. It's in an art gallery-ish space. There's another vision of that. Really fill the place up. This is on stage at Mechanics Hall, the family concert I was mentioning. Some nice cello power there. More cello power. This is actually Hanover Theater, which is another great theater in Worcester. And we had some like dance and cool stuff at that concert. Hanover Theater. And it's just some backstage fun. Nice shirt. Just some nice, I just love this kid's dimples. That's a great shot. He still has them. Another cute picture. Here's some members of our teen club. And by the way, all of our alumni so far, which is only a small handful, have gone to college. I won't brag about that too much yet because it's only our 10th year, so we're just starting to have kids graduate, but that's the goal. All 4 of those now in college. And that's it for those. Let's see. Oops. Yeah. So in other words, getting kids out into the city, into the environment is a big part of what we do. Just a couple more things I want to talk about, and then I have one more little piece of music to play. We think it's important to offer some summer activities. And so this chamber music camp I mentioned, offering substantive summer low-cost activities for kids, especially sort of creative arts activities, is really slim. I think in Worcester and in a lot of places, it's just there isn't a lot of low-cost activities for kids to do outside of school, and so we really wanted to keep what we're doing going during the summer, especially because we all know, those of us who are musicians, that if you just like take 4 months off of playing, it doesn't work very well. So we started about 3 or 4 years ago, including all of Neighborhood Strings in our summer camp. So they will, in a typical year, they will come in the afternoon every day, and it creates some pretty amazing synergy among the players, the advanced players, the kids who come to the camp, and the kids in the afternoon, and also among our faculty. I think it's, I've been really amazed and touched to see that these people who didn't necessarily choose to be part of a group that was supporting a large kids educational program really embrace the work we do with Neighborhood Strings. The musicians themselves, I can see are moved and have created some really great energy and relationships with the kids. I've been really proud over the years of our organization and how much all of the musicians have embraced the educational work that we do. So it feels like it's really at the heart of the organization now. So that summer camp, continues to be part of what we offer to kids every year. And I guess I'll, end by just, even though it's been nice not to talk about it, just to mention how we have been navigating the pandemic. We have been offering programming throughout the year. We have an out of school space we've been lucky enough to use to offer in-person programming, and I think not that many programs have been able to do that. So it's much changed. It's small groups or single lessons, and some of our teachers have chosen, for a variety of their own reasons, to do online lessons, and that works fine too. I mean, I've seen a lot of really great energy form around online work too, and there are some kids who honestly are more comfortable having lessons online than like being in a sort of more loud and hectic group environment. It's been very moving in the last 12 months, I think, to see how much the program does seem to have meant to kids when sometimes it's like the only thing that's going on. We have a lot of kids who will say, this is like pretty much the only reason I've left my house in the last 3 weeks. There hasn't been a day of school in Worcester in a year. That's about to change. But I think I've been really sort of proud and happy that we've been able to sustain our relationships through this like incredibly difficult time with kids. May things change and go back to some of those beautiful scenes at the Hanover Theater where we're all together on stage again. I think I've been really proud that we've been able to offer what we have this year. So I want to end by just playing another mini video clip. This is a pandemic clip, but kind of a nice one. This was recorded at our summer camp that I mentioned last summer, and it's a combination of NS Club members and some mentors just playing an arrangement of Amazing Grace. Oops, wrong one. Why is that sharing? There we go. So that's it. That's how a chamber music program, chamber music society, grows into a social justice oriented kids music program. And that's a little bit of our story. So thanks for listening today. And I'd be really glad if there were any questions to speak to them. And feel free to throw it in the chat if that's easier too.
Rose?
Do you, as you work with these kids, sort of get to know their families and involve their families in any way, or is, having it be something where parents who might work don't have to be there more the idea?
That's a great question. I think hopefully more of the former. We love getting to know the kids' families. And thanks for mentioning that. I mean, I think that's a really important part of the program. And I personally, that from in the sort of two-way street side of things, that's one of my favorite things about the program. Like, it's really great getting to just know lots and lots of people who come from all these different places and work in all these different places. So I love that energy. That said, there is that other part of it is too, these are often families who are really busy. I mean, I can't tell you how many parents, like, they have like an extra night shift so they can't bring their kid, or like, I didn't even know that one of my students like even had a mom until recently, because I had never seen her because she's like working some extra shift. And so, they are busy too. So it's a balance of like wanting to know them and wanting to have the families be part of the community, but also just respecting the fact that like sometimes they really do just like need their kid to like do an after school activity for a couple hours and just be happy the kid is there and not push it. So it certainly is both things.
But then they're enormously proud when they go to performances and see them performing on a stage and they come to a concert. It must be a source of great pride.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, the seeing the families, like filter in to see the kids play on stage at Mechanics Hall is a pretty beautiful thing. Or in that art gallery space, the Worcester pop-up that you saw a couple of those crowded pictures of. There is pride there, and it's great. I think for some parents, they really want their kid to play an instrument and they really get it. And for some of them, it's like, I don't know what this thing is that you're doing, but I'll show up and I'll support you. I mean, I think it varies a lot how much parents completely understand what the activity is. But that's okay. That's part of it too. And I think part of our project over time is to share, what we think is meaningful about it and try to bring the families in, through that kind of sharing, so that they can understand why we think it's such a great thing for the community.
What kind of method do you guys use in your pedagogy? Does every teacher have his or her own way of instruction, or do you have some overarching curriculum among you guys?
That's a great question. That's been a subject of discussion over the years, right, Debbie? More the latter right now. Our teachers are really different in really beautiful ways. So one of our teachers, Rohan, is like he's a fine violinist, but really sort of also like a world music guy. He loves to do improvisation. So he'll often bring those kinds of things into the work he does with his kids. And then others of our teachers are sort of more like sticklers for, we certainly do use Suzuki to some extent. We use like the Blackwell series for little kids, and Debbie and I do quite a bit. So I would say everybody brings his or her self to the curriculum. I think one thing that's challenging after 10 years in terms of unifying is we have lots of kids at different levels all the time. So we have kids who are high schoolers who've been playing for 8 or 9 or 10 years, and then we have beginners. And so if we're talking about, in theory, these great ensemble experiences, in practice, it's hard to find things for kids that are at so many different levels. So we do divide. We will have, sometimes a beginner ensemble that just does their own thing. But finding the unity in the curriculum is, the balance between letting everybody, teachers included, have a voice versus staying organized is an ongoing project, I would say.
Oh, kind of like based off of Liz's question, you mentioned that you have like some kids come like multiple days a week, and they come for like different types of programming. What, like, I guess 2 parts to this question. What are those types of programs? Like, I know you said like ensembles, and then also do you do anything with like theory classes or like history, like sort of like more like those other aspects of music that don't always play a part in private lessons?
Sure. Yeah. Well, in answer to the second part of your question, we do that most substantively right at the beginning. So when kids join the program, they don't get we don't put an instrument in their hands on day one. They spend about the first 3 or 4 months doing pre-instrument work. So that's when we will teach them to read music, and we'll do like ear training. Like we try to make it all fun, it's all games and things like that, but essentially trying to introduce a lot of those early music concepts before they ever get an instrument in their hands. And then once they start lessons, when we really have done a little more of that music theory type stuff is with the teenagers. So some of them have been interested in the NS club of, learning a little about key signatures or basic harmony and things like that. Actually, I would love to add it back in for some of those years in between. It comes down to one of those, like, there's only, so many hours in the week. But I think beefing things up with continuing ear training and theory for all kids is probably a nice goal, over the years. In terms of the other part of your question, I think sort of the basic components of what kids will have is, that private lesson time, really important. And then the ensemble usually will be a combination of, in a non-pandemic year, it'll be a big group. It'll be like everybody from one program site playing together, for X amount of time. And then ideally they also get to do a sort of in-between size group that might be like, they have a little group class with like 2 other cellos, or they're here at the same time as a mentor. And so they're going to have like a little extra lesson with a mentor who's going to practice with them. So it's private lessons, large ensemble, and then if they're able to come more than that, and we encourage that over time, we fill it in with like, something to make it feel different. Personally, I love it when those kind of practice buddy experiences work. We've had some great sort of matches over time when there's a college student who makes a connection to a kid, and the kid really will come like excited just to see this one person. It's not their teacher, but it's become a sort of, like a big brother, big sister type situation. And all the better if that person is a player or knows enough to get to help them. I think some of our best sort of like in-house practicing has happened when those situations have, magically come together.
I know, Ariana, you've only had a few college kids who've gone on to college so far, but to have any of them, or will you track any of them, whether they have continued to study music or they're interested in music when they go into school?
Yeah, I mean, we've had like 4 college graduates so far. So, so I could track them because they're all friends, like I see, but we have, one of our recent graduates is actually coming back this year during the pandemic because she's stuck at home because of online classes. So she's actually coming in as a mentor on a weekly basis, which has been really special for her and playing. That's Tabitha, the girl with the long hair who spoke a little bit in the video. Another of our students who's a WPI is playing in the orchestra there this semester. So that's really great. He's playing viola. He was one of our most advanced players, and that's great to hear. And the other 2, I think, still have music in their lives. I don't know that they're like playing specifically, but they both have come and paid visits and have those be music-oriented visits. So I do feel that they all have music pretty deep inside based on some combination of the work they did with us and just also who they are.
Great.
So things seem to be, going so well. You have this 10-year history. Do you guys have a plan for growth, or just strengthening what you already have, or just letting it organically develop? Is it the right size now? I mean, is there such a thing as too big?
Well, yeah, you asked that question at the exact moment that the group has been mired in a 3-year strategic planning process. And so those questions have been much discussed and are still in process. But, I think the basic sort of, perspective that I think we share on that is that we've always gone for sort of depth over large expansion. So I think we would do more with the kids we do have in the program and maybe grow a little bit before we would expand, to serve 3 times as many kids. It's never been a recruitment problem. We we could have 500 kids in the program if we just kind of like turned the spigots on. But we couldn't possibly serve that many kids without like a lot more money and a lot more teachers who want to be doing this kind of work, which is, we've had exceptional retention among the teachers we do have, which is very special. And so I think what we feel in our future is increasing the depth of what we do for kids, expanding little by little, but also making sure that we do right by the teachers who we have in the program. I mean, it's hard work, as I'm sure anybody who's done it knows. It's like there's a lot of things you can do that are a lot easier than doing this kind of work, even though we all really love it. So if we want to sustain over time, we have to make sure we're treating everybody right who works with the program. And I think that will remain a priority over time.
We've heard of, go ahead, Rose.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, could you speak a little bit more about catering to kids who are English language learners?
Yeah, we have seen that the most, I think, probably in the arm of the program that Debbie runs at Clark Street, the New Citizens program. The nice thing about that program, from what I understand from Debbie, and feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but that program, unlike the other arms were sort of more after school, but that one was really integrated with a classroom teacher that got to know the kids really well. And so Debbie would actually come in during the school day to work with those kids several times a week. And I think that's part of what made it possible, that the teacher really knew the kids and she was working with the principal and with the teacher. So even though there were like kids from 9 countries and a group of 15 kids, which is amazing, it was the relationship with the school and the teacher that allowed that to happen in a positive way. In our other program sites, it's more common to see kids who speak the language fine, but parents who don't really speak a word. So that creates a challenge with family communication. But I mean, it's pretty amazing how fast kids learn English. Like, let me tell you, I had a student just this year who was like, I just found, he told me like, oh, he had just come from the Dominican Republic like 7 months ago, and he didn't like speak a word of English then. And he was like just chattering away. So, in a way, like kids are just so good at being English language learners that I think where we deal with it more probably is family communication. Fortunately, we have some good relationships with the public schools that facilitate that. These schools typically, have like a sort of like a wraparound coordinator type person who can help us. So if we say, I got to talk to this parent. I don't know what's going on with the schedule or the kid. They haven't shown up, there's someone at the school who can help us facilitate that communication. And without that, it would be a lot harder. I think the relationship with the school is very fruitful for those kinds of issues.
It's possible that some of the people who are watching this will be inspired to go out and do work like this in the future. Do you think and we've been amazed to witness how many success stories there are. Do you think with enough persistence, this kind of project is inevitably successful?
Well, interesting question. I guess what I think on the subject is like, we have to sort of change the model or evolve the model of what it is just like to be a musician in this time. I think, even for people who are, born 50 years ago, there were like different kinds of paths. Like it was easier, in some cases to find an orchestra job or to play recitals and get paid for it around the US. And, in a certain kind of way, times are changing. And so I think, musicians have to be very sort of like entrepreneurial and thinking about like what will our careers as musicians look like. And at the same time, there's this incredible need for, quality cultural education for kids, or for opening up the field, or, for seeking diversity in the field. So those things just, they really feel like they are calling out to each other. Like musicians need to have work, and they need to sort of like be relevant in the 21st century, and kids, need like creative outlets, and they need to connect with each other. And so in that sense, I think that there's a kind of inevitability that just like it makes sense. And there's a lot of momentum for social justice oriented music programs around the world. That said, I can't say it enough that like it is incredibly hard work, and not everybody wants to do it, and not everybody has to do it. I think it's for me, and I would guess I would speak for my colleagues too. It creates this incredible variety, even within the day. Whether you are interacting with a family or with a kid in an intense way, and then maybe you're going to go rehearse some music that's like sort of pulls your mind apart in a totally different way, and then it creates this like very rich tapestry of life as a musician that I think is really appealing. And I really felt that, I think, when I first encountered Community Music Works, and I was around all these musicians, and it was like, wow, these people like really, really are happy and like proud of what they're doing and like what they do. And like, you don't feel that at every orchestra gig that you encounter. You don't necessarily feel that like vibrancy and pride around what you're doing. So I think, for people who have that reaction to this kind of work, then, yes, I think if you feel that way, then you will work until you succeed, probably.
Any more questions from students?